like I had mentioned before, printers seem to be the one thing that if you take a practice test, it might come back that that's one of your weaker areas, and that's okay. So they're a necessary evil when it comes to environments that you're going to work in with IT. Now, over the last couple of years, has it gotten a lot better? Yes. Digital signing's no longer something that you have to like pay for. It's something that's a lot more accepted as a society. So we're seeing less and less things printed, but there still is a need for having printers and for you having the skills to set up those printers. Lots of printers.
We own the printers, not like.
Oh, you're not leasing them?
Yes. Well, some of them are leased. The biggest ones are leased, but we own
A lot of them. Yeah. So a lot of times too, when you're negotiating print contracts, they're going to be on a per page basis, and then you lease the hardware, and then sometimes at the end of the lease they don't want it back, so you can buy it a lot. It's a lot less expensive if you buy it out like at the end of the lease if you really liked those printers. So that might have been something that they did in the past as well, instead of just outright buying pallets of printers. And anymore, we're doing a lot of centralized printing anymore, where everything goes to what's called an MFP. Who knows what MFP stands for? Yeah. Magical functioning printer. You got two of them, right?
no, it's magical fart printer.
I don't think that's it at all. But when this gets uploaded to YouTube, that'll be hilarious that that's one of the options. Multi-function printer. So what are the different functions? You said magical. It's like the same thing. So what are those multi-functions?
Stapling, hole punching, printing on both sides.
So printing.
Laminating.
Printing. No.
I don't know.
No.
And we got changed for 20.
So yours is more talking about finishing. Like that's called finishing when you can staple stuff, hole punch, things like that. That's in the finisher, so it's not necessarily a function of the printer. They're specifically talking about the different things that the printer can do as far as copying, scanning, and printing. Those are the kind of the common ones. Also, you can fax, scan to email, those kind of things. But those are the different functions that they have. Okay. So what are our goals for this actual module? We obviously want to talk about different types of printers. Do you guys want to take your conversation outside, please? Thank you. James, Sam, can you take your conversation outside since I'm recording? Thank you. So our goal is to be able to identify printer connections and ports, and then also go through the different types of printers that there are out there. So we've seen inkjet printers in our lifetimes. We've seen copiers, which tend to be laser. You've probably gotten a receipt from somewhere, like McDonald's or Taco Bell. Those are going to be our thermal printers. Then there's also other ones like impact printers or more specialized printers that you need to identify for the A+ exam. Also, 3D printers are now part of the A+ exam, so you have to have knowledge of that as well. So if you see something on an exam topic and it says additive printing, chances are they're talking about resin printers and 3D printers. Okay. Also, as a IT technician, you're going to probably have to share printers out, so more than one user can use a printer. In the labs, you're just going to, we only have a certain amount of printers that we can use. I think I have like 2, maybe 3. So instead of going through, if you want to do the hands-on lab, I'll unplug the one that's on my desk, and then there's one, I think there's one over there, and I think one in the cabinet, that you guys will be able to use in order to, add it to the machine and then share it out. But you can also, I'll show you how to go through and just add a file printer, it's called, which is just like a temporary one just to prove that something works, where if you send a print job to it, it'll just like create a file on the computer itself. So kind of a proof of concept type of thing. And then we'll talk about, obviously, maintaining and troubleshooting printers. That's something that you are going to be doing quite a bit. Simple things like clearing a paper jam to more advanced topics, like what type of preventative maintenance do you do, what type of safety things you have to acknowledge, those kind of things as it pertains to printers. What do you think is going to be at the end of this module when it comes to troubleshooting? The thing that's been in pretty much every module so far. Well, yeah, test, but like as far as like the content. When it comes to troubleshooting. Yes, the troubleshooting process. So it proves that it is not going away. It's just going to be applying that process to now printers. just like we did it for laptops, just like we did for mobile devices, all that. So again, it's that repetition of seeing that troubleshooting process that should tell you how important it is to know that for the A+ exam. So what are the different types of printers that are out there? So we talked about inkjet. Who can explain what an inkjet printer is?
Basically, get a bunch of little ink jets. Yeah, jets of ink that squirt out onto the paper. I can't.
Yeah.
That is what they do.
That's pretty solid. Yeah. Yep.
You want me to go specific and say there's a little cartridge that heats up a small amount of ink, so it expands an incredibly small amount and goes through a tiny hole and spits it out on the page in a very specific spot and has a row of thousands of those on the printer head?
No, I want you to say it's a jet of ink.
It's a jet of ink.
It's a jet of ink.
It's pretty much just a jet of ink with some pressure and some heat things, right?
Yeah.
So with that, so what do you think some advantages of inkjet is, or are?
It's probably pretty effective.
It's pretty effective.
Pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate. Not fastest, but someone said it over here. More accurate or higher resolutions. You can usually get more.
You get color.
And you can
You
print
get
in
color.
liquid ink.
There you go. And what?
Liquid ink.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Fade out.
What's that?
Doesn't inkjet fade out?
Does it fade out like the cartridges? Like if you don't use them?
Paper.
I don't know that it would fade more. Yeah, I guess it would fade a little bit more, the pigments, than what you're used to seeing with a laser printer. But yeah, that really depends on the environment. But yeah, it's more susceptible to fading because it's not burned into the actual paper itself. 3D printer. Who can tell me what a 3D printer is? Anybody but? Okay, what does it use as its
Like a
ink
spool
or its
of
filament?
Lactic acid.
Yeah, full of plastic.
You weren't supposed to answer.
Yeah, it was like a spool of plastic.
PLA.
Use filament.
Filament, yeah, different types of filament, like PLA, which stands for. I told you you can't answer. I know.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. Polylactic acid. I'm not sure though. Don't quote me.
I won't quote you ever.
Good.
Definitely. How about a laser printer? The laser. Very solid. Who can tell me a example of a laser printer that you use on a semi-daily basis? Yes.
At work, our little handheld printers, the laser printers that on the stickers.
Those are thermal printers.
I think they're.
Printers, never mind, sorry.
Yeah. Hold that thought.
Okay.
What is one that you use almost every day? Your MFPs, right? The multi-function copiers that we have. Those are going to use very large form factor laser technology, and they're as small as like the one on my desk is a laser printer as well. So it doesn't have to be large. That little guy that's right there is a small black and white laser printer that's there. Thermal printers. Now here we go. Simon. Yeah. What's an example of a thermal printer?
The little handheld printers we use.
No, those actually use a different. No, I'm kidding. Yes, those are so your receipt printers or like for the stickers for retail, such as Walmart. Those are going to be thermal printers where they react to the paper actually reacts to going through the printer itself. So something's not necessarily written onto the paper actually reacts to it. So, oops. Okay, sorry. Yep, impact printers. So, what are impact printers? If you've never seen or heard of one, break the two words down. Impact printer.
Isn't that so? Like an impact printer is in simplest form is a typewriter.
Yep.
And in its most advanced form is like a printing press.
Kinda.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, more
Because it's
advanced
impact.
than that,
Yes.
but you have an ink you put it on the paper and it puts things on paper. Ink.
Absolutely. So, are those still used today?
Not as much. They're pretty common in like warehouses and stuff like that.
Yes. Or if you go to like O'Reilly's or Napa, or for some reason auto parts stores don't know how to like advance into the modern time. Maybe they bought like I don't know 30 containers of the paper and all the products, but like O'Reilly's still today uses impact printers. A lot of times too, if you remember when you were younger, you might have gotten like some paper to draw on, and it was like green and white lines on it that had little things that you like tore off the sides. And no, none of. No. Did you not have a childhood?
I did.
Nobody had a childhood. Okay. Yeah, so they're gonna be. They usually came in like big boxes and then fed up through the actual printer itself. So, any questions on kind of a high level overview of what these printers are or what these printers do? Yes, I did continue my recording. Thank you for reminding me. So, printer speed, quality, and color. So, a couple things that you have to be aware of when it comes to just having the vocabulary for the exam itself is the ppm, or the pages per minute. So, that's how many pages a printer can bring from the tray through whatever printing mechanism it has out to the top till it's ready to rock and roll. Okay. The quality of the actual print itself is measured in DPI, or dots per inch. Okay, so how much, if I can do 30,000 different color dots in 1 inch, I'm going to have a lot of resolution compared to maybe 50, right? Because there's only 50 dots and it's going to be very jumbled, kind of like think about like an 8-bit game versus a more modern game. Okay, that's going to be very similar to having that lower DPI. You'll also see when it comes to print, we're used to seeing like RGB color, but when it comes to print and like graphic design and stuff, you're going to see CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, is usually. So when it comes to color, it has CMY. B was taken. That's a good research thing. You should research that.
I'm gonna Google that.
Yes.
It stands for Kilimanjaro, actually.
Kilimanjaro, like
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. It's right there.
Paul.
Key color. I really don't know if that's the answer, but it's a K, so I just said hey, maybe.
That could be it.
But yeah, you
That
should
sounds amazing.
you should Google that, and you should enlighten us. You should regale us with the
I
details.
think it correlates, actually.
So when it comes to our whatever printer, it is key. When it comes to choosing the printer that we use, these are the things that we have to take into consideration. What is the warranty on the device? What is the scheduled servicing? If I have to schedule this thing every other week, it's some high-end printer, then why, what is the actual use case that determines there? There are going to be some environments that just need it, especially like print shops that are doing, millions of runs a day. They're probably going to be serviced more often because they have more things that are going through it. You're not going to want something that has to or won't hold up to that level of jobs. You wouldn't want to purchase that because it's going to be broken down a lot more. This is a word that you'll see referenced more in contracts than anything, and that's the MTBF, or mean time between failures. So this is giving you kind of a dependability rating of the actual device itself, because it's between how much time has passed since the last failure has occurred and what is that average. And then from there, we break down our TCO, or our total cost of ownership. So that's going to be not just the initial price, but how much is it going to take to do maintenance on this machine? How much does the ink cost? If you've ever, you or your parents or where you work, they go to buy ink cartridges for the inkjet printer, and most commonly you'll hear it's cheaper just to buy a new printer, because that you have to look at that total cost of ownership. When you're looking at different inkjet printers, don't just buy whatever's cheap or whatever's, in the ad this week, if you will, or whatever they're running a sale on. Make sure you look at the price of the refill supplies, okay? And that's what determines your total cost of ownership. Also, in your career as a IT technician, or, if you become an IT manager, whatever it is, you have to become very familiar with this word, because the people that are spending money, if you go to them and say, I want to buy this MacBook, it is $2,500, and they come back and say, why can't you just get a Windows machine? You would be able to then explain the total cost of ownership. Maybe it's the lower mean time between failures. Maybe it's you don't have to buy certain software. You can be risky and maybe not have antivirus on it, so that's going to lower that cost. Okay, so it helps you kind of argue what you want to purchase when you look at the total cost of ownership. Make sense? Cool. See, printers aren't bad. I don't know why everybody's scared of them. All those things. Ugh, intense. So when it comes down to just breaking off from the slides a little bit, in my career, one of the most common things that I've seen for networked printers and not being able to print is an IP address issue or an IP mismatch. So from the little bit that we talked about networking, who remembers DHCP? Hopefully everybody remembers DHCP and what it does. It's handing out IP addresses, right? So I worked in one environment, it was Firelands Local Schools, where we constantly had this issue. One of my coworkers would set up a new printer, and he wouldn't go into the DHCP server and do an exclusion. So next thing you know, you have a teacher's computer that has the same IP address of a printer. So what's going to happen at a random interval? It's going to be one of those, hey, sometimes it prints, sometimes it doesn't. And then you'd have to like track when it actually doesn't work to try to figure out what device is getting that IP address, or go in there and do that exclusion. And this would happen a lot, like on a weekly basis, probably once or twice a week, these things would change without being told me. He wouldn't tell me that these changes were taking place. So that's a really common one. Also, drivers are going to be a very common thing that you have to update, or they'll try to use a default or generic driver. Windows has gotten a lot better. We talked about the troubleshooters before, about they're actually kind of helpful. It's the same thing with the printers. As more and more drivers are available through Windows updates, you see less and less issues with printers because now they can query the printer and say, hey, what are you? Oh, I'm an HP LaserJet 2910 DW. Cool. So then it'll go to Windows Update and say, hey, I need a driver for an HP blah, 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 blah. It'll download it, it'll install it, and it'll just work for the users. It's very consumer friendly now compared to what it used to be. It used to be you couldn't even plug if you plugged in the printer, then you'd have issues forever if you didn't put the disc in first. It was actually to the point where they used to put tape over the ports in the box that read, do not plug this in until you put the disc in your computer. Now that has gotten exponentially easier. You'll literally just plug it in, it'll auto find it, and you're ready to go. Okay, so drivers could be an issue with it using like a default driver. It could be cabling, like if it's a USB. If it's a USB port, again, even though the OSI model doesn't necessarily pertain to like USB printers, still use that as your method of troubleshooting. Like check the physical connection first. Okay, does it work? Cool. Is it lit up on both sides? Yes. Does Windows see it? Yes. And go up from there. A lot of people will just kind of overlook the simple things and make their lives exponentially easier. So back to the slides themselves. So what you need to know for the actual test is just being familiar with what some of these terms mean. So like automatic document feeder, ADF, that'll just be something that you'll kind of have to drill a little bit. With that, that's what's actually pulling that paper into your printer. So you can see that it's there right on the top, where you can put things like the copy machine, you can put your papers on the top and it'll actually pull them through in order to be scanned. Okay. Why do you think this is a good feature to have on like a copy machine? Yeah.
So then when I like scan and copy like more than one paper, you don't have to sit there and be like, okay, copy this one, and now this one, and
Right.
now this one. You just and then
Them all in.
it goes.
Absolutely. So on this actual device here, this is a handle and this lifts up and it's a flatbed scanner on there. So if this didn't have the feeder, you would literally have to put the first page on, close it, start. Next one, put it on there, or flip it over and let it scan. So this will save a ton of time when it comes to doing any copying or scanning. It's pretty commonplace now for scan to cloud or scanning to a folder or email. Most of the time, it's scan to email. Back in the day, we used to scan to a folder when we used to have like home folders when you logged into a computer. But now everything's kind of cloud-based, or it's just as easy just to email yourself from the copy machine for whatever physical copy you needed as a digital file. Any questions on that? No? So we'll go through some of these because we've already talked about a lot of them. Inkjet printers, advantages, low cost, high resolution. Disadvantage is the nozzles that are on there are very prone to clogging. Someone mentioned the fading of the actual pages themselves. If you wait too long, like I have a inkjet printer at home that I haven't used since like last winter, so I just had to buy new cartridges for it just because I know if I tried to print anything through that, it would be dried up and it would be no good. So again, with laser, it tends to last a lot longer. You don't have to worry about the ink expiring or the toner expiring in laser printers. But with ink, it's very susceptible to drying out. Also, it's worth noting that the ink, this is a wet printing process, so that paper needs to dry before you can do anything with it. So I've seen, they were older printers, but they would come out and they would print, and then they would lay on top of each other, so it like would smear what you just printed. But the newer ones, they're not as bad. They do dry a little bit quicker. So when it comes to the actual inkjet printer itself, it'll come in through the roller, and then up here is the carriage. So that's where all of your ink cartridges go into. So you can see that we have our CMYK, our cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or key color, as we've learned that it's K. This actually rides back and forth on a belt, and it'll go back and forth as it's like painting the picture that you have at the thousands of dots per inch. This is the actual print head itself where the cartridges go in. You can see that there's that little nozzle there on the bottom. So this is what it looks like with the cartridges in there. This is what it looks like with the cartridges removed. So the cartridges go inside the print head, and the print head rides on the carriage or the belt, okay? If you do have a machine that can print on both sides, that's called duplexing. So it might have a way to turn that paper over on the inside of the printer, okay? So you don't have to like send it through and then flip it over and then resend it through. The printer can handle that on its own. I think that's it for that. Cool. Laser jet. So remember, this was a lower cost to purchase as an advantage, but then when we get to laser printers, you can see we have a lower cost per page. So what is that called when we have to take those different things into consideration? Just talked about it a couple slides ago. TCO. The total cost of ownership, right? So a laser printer might be a better thing to implement if it's going to be something that's being printed either a lot, or it's something that maybe is used very sparingly, but you don't, if it was inkjet and you had that, like let's say I had an inkjet printer on my desk instead, if I don't use that thing once a month, it's going to dry up. So that's where it might be better to put a laser printer there as well. High pages per minute, high capacity, high quality. It uses a laser beam or LEDs to actually create the image. And the print comes out dry because it's when it goes through, it's actually being heated up, and it's going through the actual, when it actually goes through the device, it comes out and it's pretty much baked into the paper itself. It does have a high initial cost, and toner cartridges can be expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, you can find them on Amazon they're relatively inexpensive for the most of the time.
If you get off-brand inkjet stuff, that ink is so incredibly cheap,
Yes.
and it's stupid how much they mark up from actual name brand stuff.
It is, and I've done like the cartridge refill thing back in the day. There's places that I don't know if they're still out there, but there used to be stores that you would go to have your print cartridges refilled. Like there's a whole business model around taking them there because ink cartridges were so expensive back in the day. Now with the advent of the internets and being able to same day toner cartridges or inkjet cartridges, I think the refill places all did go out of business. When it comes to our laser printer, you'll notice that there are some different things. We don't have this carriage that's going back and forth holding our print head. Instead, we have our imaging drum, our transfer roller. The next page is going to actually explain like the paper flow. So just bear with me. Our pickup rollers, our toner cartridge itself, the fuser assembly, and the duplexing assembly. So the only thing they really had in common there was the duplex. So these are the actual steps for how laser printing works. I will upload these slides. This is probably the one that for the actual A+ exam that you're going to want to pay the most attention to. So the first thing, it's going to come in and it's going to do processing. So this is where it's going to take its data stream and convert it into something that the printer understands. So it's going to pull it from RAM. What does RAM stand for? Random access memory. It's going to pull it from there and it's going to process it in a way that it can actually talk to the printing mechanism in order to get the print that you're looking for. Next, it's going to charge the drum. So even if you know nothing about printing, what does charging mean? If you charge your phone, adding electricity to the actual drum itself. Okay, so it's saying, hey, it's ready for the new image to come in. Now we're going to move on to exposing. So it's going to actually take the image or whatever image, meaning it could be a document too. It's not just like a JPEG image or like something you pulled from, the meme channel. The image can be also your text document as well. So it's going to expose it onto the drum using the laser beam. Okay, so we have our laser that comes out, it hits a mirror, and it puts it onto the drum. So if you've ever used a digital camera that's not mirrorless, you hold it up to your face and you look through a little eyepiece here, right? What happens is that path of light does this off of a mirror, it's like a periscope, and it goes through the lens, okay? It's the same thing that you're seeing here with the laser. So the laser is drawing that image onto the actual drum itself. So then when it hits this developing stage, this is where toner actually goes onto the drum. And it's only adhered to where it was charged based on that image. Okay? So like if you ever done, maybe when you were in like elementary school, you took some glue and you put it on your paper and then you dumped like a bunch of glitter on it. And all that was left was like what you put glue on. Did you guys have no childhood? Has elementary school changed that much?
I did that.
Okay, you get that. Okay.
Oh, I did that too.
So that's kind of that same idea here, in that it's being drawn onto the drum, it's collecting the toner here, and then it's going to transfer it onto the paper. So then from there, we're going to fuse it. So we're going to add heat and pressure to the actual paper itself. So we're going to kind of smush it in there. And then as it comes up here, it's going to clean off any additional toner from that drum so it can go through that process again. That's a lot, isn't it? It's pretty cool how it works. But it's able to do this at very high rates. So like 25 pages per minute. Like it can just sit there and crank it up. And you'll hear a laser printer when it first starts up because you'll hear it like heat up because it has to start charging this drum so it can start drawing things on it. Question?
I thought it was cool. I didn't even know that they had mirrors. I thought it just kind of lazed it all on
It's
there.
like it just lazed it on there.
There's laser 3D printers that like melt metal with lasers. It's sick.
That would be dope.
Metal particles floating around inside the laser melts it.
It deposits a super thin layer of metal particles.
And then the laser melts it on the spot.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Cleveland State University has one. Yeah.
Any questions on how laser printing works? Does that make sense? Cool. Thermal printers. So thermal printers, like I said, the paper actually reacts to the heat being added to the actual paper itself. These are nice because they're super fast. You don't have to wait for them to warm up. I mean, you've seen how fast, like, if you've printed labels from the are they still called Telzons? The handheld computers that you guys have at Walmart? Zebras. Or the handheld. So they'll print out a bunch of labels pretty quickly, right? They don't have to wait for anything to warm up. You don't have to install or you don't have to pay for any ink or toner because it's a reaction that's actually happening. They last a really long time because it doesn't have all those moving parts like a laser does or an inkjet printer, right? That back and forth constantly with a laser printer, there's going to be a lot of wear and tear. And then one of the disadvantages is the thermal paper can be expensive. I don't think it's super expensive, but it does have to be stored at room temperature. So if you have like back in the freezer, let's say, or back in the dairy, these printers aren't going to work as well, right? Anytime there's moisture in there, because it's throwing off the actual reaction that's happening, right? So don't want to store your paper where it's either too hot, too cold, or too wet. It has to be right at that room temperature. And after time, they can degrade, and then also they are susceptible to, like, if they rub together, you could lose the information that's on them.
So with like label makers, like with the strips of adhesive labels, would that be a thermal printer?
Depends on the actual label printer that you're talking about, but like the little dynamo ones,
Yeah.
yes.
Like the brother.
Yeah, or like the brother ones, yeah, because that's not going to be any ink or anything in there.
Yeah.
It's actually heating that up in order as it comes through. So yes, that would be the technology in my head would be a thermal printer. Yep. Any questions on those? What do you think the most common application for this type of printer is? Receipts. Yeah, but most of the time it's receipts, and also shipping labels. So, like for me in my for selling magic cards, I have one of these printers that's sitting there that'll do 5x7 UPS labels, because again, it's something that prints every now and again. And then also with labels, what would happen if I sent labels through this? There are labels sheets that are made for laser printers, but knowing this process that you know now, what does a label have on it? Adhesive. So does adhesive like heat? No. So what happens a lot of times is you'll get where the adhesive will warm up and it won't be sticky, and then all of a sudden we'll go for a ride on your drum, and then when it comes out, you'll see where it's like stuck to the drum, and you have to go in there and try to retrieve it because it's stuck in there. So that's where thermal printers are nice, in that they can they just pull the paper right in and put whatever you want printed on them, and then you can rip it off. So anytime there's like adhesive labels, thermal printers do a good job as well. Impact printers. So these, again, you really just have to know what these are. And like you said it best. They're like typewriters, in that you have this paper, and then there's like this stamp that's just typing onto that paper. Okay. I don't even want to talk about the pros and cons, because you guys probably will never see them in your career. Virtual printers. So chances are you've probably seen on your Chromebooks, when you go to file print, you have the option to print to a PDF. You guys understand what that means? Whatever you have on the screen, it'll create a PDF. So when you're doing your lab, you'll go to File, New Printer, and then under the option, look for where it says Print to File, okay? Because again, unless you're one of the ones that are using the printers that we have, because what it's going to do, it's going to take whatever job it receives, and it's going to spit out some type of file, okay? This is more built into the operating system now. This is one of those things that with older machines like Windows 7, early Windows 10 machines, they didn't have the ability to save it as a PDF, so you'd have to install like a third-party utility like Foxit, or there's a couple other ones out there. So you might have to do that, but with it being directly built into the system, just be aware that these are called virtual printers on the A+ exam. Anytime you're going to print it as a PDF, Microsoft likes to have their own XL or XHTML file. That can be some users will complain that when they try to print, that comes up, and they're printing to a file when they think they're actually printing to their actual printer itself. Cloud printing, it is what it says it is. Google Cloud Print allows you to print from your mobile devices or from a Chromebook. This has gotten a lot easier to manage in the actual enterprise environment. Before, there was a little third-party utility that would like sync your printers up, like your print server up to the Google Cloud, and you'd have to like constantly go in there and like clear out the queue. But now it's a lot more streamlined in that you can, it connects to a service through Google, and you send your print jobs to that service, and they'll come out of your printer. Use case as far as enterprise, not really used that much. It's more of a consumer technology where you can add your printers to your device and be like, oh, I need to print this off at home. You can print it from here, and when you get home, it'll be there. Or just being able to print from your mobile device. It makes it that much easier. Same thing too. You might see like AirPrint, which is on iOS devices, which allows you to send your print job directly to the printer. If you have an older printer and it doesn't have AirPrint, there are third-party utilities that you can install on your Windows or your Mac that will then advertise it over Bonjour, which is the network protocol from Apple. It's also called Multicast DNS that advertises that printer out there so your phone can actually see it. Okay. So if it's something that you want to mess around with at home and you have an older printer, by show of hands, how many people have a printer at home? A non 3D printer at home? So a couple. Most of you do. Okay. More of a curiosity than anything. But yeah, if you want to share that out with your iOS device, you might have to utilize a third-party software. It is an inkjet? Yep. Very cool. 3D printers, obviously, we have them in the classroom. You guys are always welcome to print whatever you want on them. We should have, my meeting's next Tuesday, we should have a fancy new one coming in next year that does even more cool things. But you've seen some of the stuff that it prints. So everything from like little cases to, we have back there, we have like the dice roller. I mean, if you wanted to print one of these, you could. Specialized pieces for robots even. That could be done on the 3D printer. Uses filament. The filament goes into a feeder. The axis, just like your math homework, the X and Y axis, XYZ axis, it rides back and forth and just puts your filament on your build plate. It heats up the actual filament itself and is able to build 3D things. And there's one person that knows exponentially more about this than any of us. So if you have questions, ask Simon. All right, installing and configuring printers. Most of the time, for the A+ exam, the first thing you're going to do is pull it out of the box, remove all the manufacturer's packing material, and then if something is damaged or broken, then return it. Okay, that's going to be like I've seen that question come up in test banks before. It's the physical inspection of the item is what they're trying to get you to do. Most of the time, we just like turn the box upside down and it like falls out and we just like hook it up. What the A+ is looking for is saying, hey, make sure it wasn't like damaged in shipping or anything like that. Most of the time, like I said, we talked about it a little bit ago, you won't have to install any drivers, but just read the instructions. Like if it says, hey, don't plug this in until you install drivers, what do you want to do? Do not plug it in immediately. So you can ask him about anything 3D printer related, regular printer related. Probably not a good idea. Test printer functions. So this is one thing if I ever got a help desk ticket and it said that my printer wasn't working, I would go in there and either fix the issue or it might not have been an issue, but I would always print a test page, okay? And built into each operating system, you'll have the ability to go in there and do file print test page, and it'll go through and it'll actually literally list what driver is being used, the time the print was set, the computer it was sent from. So it gives you that, it proves that you were there and you tried it. Because a lot of times you're going to be going into rooms when people aren't there or offices when people aren't there, especially with schools. Like you're not going to go in and interrupt anybody teaching. You would come back probably when they're gone to be able to fix whatever issue they might have. So test pages do a good job of getting all that information on there for you. In the lab, you're going to install a printer. So Simon brought up earlier when we were talking about multifunction printers, he talked about like stapling and hole punching, and I think Bobby even said laminating. I'm yet to see an MFP that does lamination. Could be out there. I've just never worked in that large of a print shop before. But all of those features, even like duplexing, the size of the actual print that's coming through, or I'm sorry, the paper that's coming through, those are all set up in the configuration settings or the configuration options, okay? So you can go in there, and this is why we install the full-fledged drivers, because if we're sending a document to the MFP that's in the office, that's the biggest one that I know of in the district. That has 3-hole punching, that has stapling, that has a lot of these other features. And what happens is it goes through the print process, and then it has a finishing option where you can go in there and choose where you want that staple to be. You can even have it do like 3 staples down the side if it's more like a book or a pamphlet. You can get advanced where it'll pull like a cover in that from another, like let's say I wanted it to have a blue cover. You can do all of those settings in your finishing settings. But if you don't install a advanced driver or the actual driver from the manufacturer, when you go to your settings, it might have duplex if you're lucky, or it might have, the ability to change to some default paper sizes. But the computer doesn't know what it's printing to, right? So that's why you install those drivers. So that way you're kind of teaching it how to be a translator, right? Because the first step in our printing, specific to our laser printers, was convert it over to something that it uses. The driver's doing that same thing. It's taking what you have on your screen and converting it into a language that the printer can understand, okay? So all of those options that you're going to see are going to be under the specific software for the actual machine itself, okay? So when you install it, go check it out. Go see what options are under the printer, so that way you guys can get familiar with these screens, because a lot of times you're going to have to help users. They're going to be like, I need to print this thing and I need to have it staple. Okay, you're gonna be the person that's going in there to help them. Okay, and again, that's easy stuff that you can fix and be a superhero. You can do upgrading. Never have I done any upgrading other than like firmware updates, and even then, the contractor that manages the printers and copiers, a lot of times they'll do that. It's super easy. You literally put a flash drive in and say update firmware. But other than that, it's yep, it'll automatically do it. And the fear really isn't there anymore for it to for you to like mess something up. But if you have a vendor that does normal maintenance on your stuff, then you won't have to worry about that. Printer sharing. What does that mean when you're sharing something? Yep, giving it to another thing. So you're making it available for other people to print to. It's literally as easy as right click, going to share, and then turning on the printer sharing. You can share it over the wireless network, wired network. You can also connect to a lot of devices and share them via Bluetooth as well. So why do you think that we would, with this advent of like cloud printing and all this, why do you think we would still need print servers? Or who can tell me what a print server even is? Even using context clues. Anybody but Simon. Go ahead.
It's similar to our school's like print service. It is like it's a server that sends all the prints to, so that, like, for example, if you have your computer and you just send it through the server and it goes to all the printers in the whole school. So basically, it goes to each individual printer. Yep. So if you want to print it at a different printer, you can go print it there.
Yep. So that's actually, that technology is called follow me printing. So you print it to the server, you walk up, you put your little badge on it, it sends a ping to the server and says, what print jobs do you have available for this person? You choose them on the device, and then it pulls them down. Okay. What does that also allow us to do from the Career Center's point of view? We can probably do something with those print jobs, right? So identification, yeah. So we could tie a person to a print job, right?
I'd say the identification of what you are.
Yep. So we have visibility, right, into what people are printing. What else? Absolutely. So we can go in there and say no print jobs over 10 pages, which then you guys would just do 10 print jobs of 10 pages each. But we could put some of those things on. We could put some of those things in effect. Think of more like a business. Where would that be useful in a business? And we do it for the same reason here, but yeah. So if there's secure documents like contracts and stuff like that, you can have what's called secure print, where you have to put like a passcode in order to, even if you have a physical badge, you might have to put like a pin in there. Sure. What runs our world? Money. Okay. So if we know that the graphics department, they probably print a lot more than the cyber department, right? We can bill accordingly, right? So we can have accurate budgets that take that into account. So we could say, oh, this was our marketing department, this was our sales department, and we can bill them back for the cost of that.
So you think we could print money
That is not at all what I said.
Not the
No,
point. What
no,
he's
I
saying is
I
that
think
Not
he
at all.
said something
Okay.
similar to that.
Yeah.
No.
What he's saying is that
Infinite money
paper,
glitch.
how much it costs, right?
Yeah.
So they can assign a certain amount of pages for a certain amount of parts.
Yeah, I know. I'm just taking his words out of context.
He's making a little joke.
So you do have the option too. There are hardware as well as software print servers. So again, if you have a virtual environment that has the room, just throw a VM up there. Use open source print servers or the built-in one for Windows. Or you can get a hardware device that is a print server. They tend to be a little bit smaller, about yay big, that you can plug like in the USB cable in, and then it'll put it on the network. Anymore like laser printers and stuff, they're all coming where they're network connected. Okay, so you don't really even have to use the hardware print servers. Okay, we're on our final section. It's the final countdown. So when we talked about laser printers, we talked about one thing that could be dangerous. Really, two things. What should we be cautious of when it comes to laser printers? Getting lased, or the technology. What is that actually doing? Heating up things. So we have to be cautious of heat. Number one. What's the second thing?
Didn't we say like stickers or something? Moisture.
It's a danger to you as a technician. Electricity is the other thing. So those are some common things that you have to be cognizant of, and make sure that if you haven't been trained to do that, then don't go in there and start taking stuff apart. Okay? Because there is the danger of being electrocuted or being burned. Preventative maintenance. Again, clean stuff. Make sure you're using whatever the manufacturer recommends, like isopropyl alcohol, to go through and clean the inside of any of the printers. You might have to replace any ribbon when it's a impact printer. Again, because you have your ribbon that's there and you have this hammer that's kind of hitting it and then making the ink show up on the paper. So you might have to clean or replace the ribbon. 3D printers, you might have a clogged nozzle, so you might have to like heat it up or clean it out. There it is. There's your boy. 6-step troubleshooting process is identify the problem, establish a theory of probable cause, test the theory to determine the cause, establish a plan of action to resolve the problem and implement the solution, verify full system functionality and, if applicable, implement preventative measures, and then finally document findings, actions, and outcomes. Why is that last one important? To prove that you've done it, sure. There's a level of accountability.
In case it happens again and again and again,
Then you have documentation.
I feel like it's more
Yep.
of the
100%.
reason why you document findings is so if other people have the problem.
Right. So if it happens again, they'll be able to. Yep. Boom, boom, boom. We all know all that fun stuff. So some common problems that you might run into: an application does not print. We talked about that. It could be something as easy as a cable. It could be it's out of paper. It really depends. You'd probably want to get a little bit more information about what does the actual error say, or does it say that it printed and then nothing comes out? So the computer's like, hey, everything's okay, but something might be messed up on the actual printer itself. Make sure that there's not like a job, quote unquote, hung up in the print queue. You might have to go in there and clear out jobs because, again, even if it's a local printer, you still have a print queue because you could go and print like 20 different things, right? It's going to then create a queue on its own and slowly send those jobs to that printer. Why doesn't it send them all at once? Do printers have 128 gigs of RAM? No, they have really small amounts of RAM. So it has to slowly send that information over so it doesn't just go into a lockdown and it doesn't crash. Yep. Cool. Do you guys feel like you learned about the printers? Do you feel
The one guy's
Nice and
video
safe.
helped, actually.
the what?
The one guy's video on Udemy.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Mike Myers. He's the one that used the laze term.
No, that was actually.
Oh, that's copyright you.
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. Any questions on printers before I end the recording? Yes.
is there maintenance stuff that'll be on the A plus? Like you have to find a maintenance kit with this specific brush or any specific.
So maintenance kits, and I guess I kind of went over that quickly. Maintenance kits are going to come from the manufacturer, and it's going to have everything that you need in it. So it'll be new rollers. It'll have new, depending on like what model it's for. It's going to be any wear pieces. It's going to replace those. So like if it was a car, it would have 4 new tires, 4 new sets of brakes, 4 spark plug wires, all that stuff. That's kind of you have to change over time. It would have everything in it, so that way you can replace those things. But again, most of the time in a corporate environment, you're going to have a company that does that for you that you'll have to manage. I don't think I've ever installed a maintenance kit on a printer. I've never had to install a maintenance printer. Just issues, come fix it. It's not hard to do, but no, I don't think that there will be questions like what's missing from this maintenance kit. I don't think that stuff like that will be on there. Was that your question?
Yes.
I don't remember any specific, like, it's more like what is the thermal printer used for, or match the application to the type of printer. Those are the types of questions.